Mad or bad.
Yeah, are they psychopaths? And you hear a lot of these phrases thrown around, but actually they're not what we say. And a really interesting example that I think I've discussed with you before is psychopaths.
Many times. Your favorite
times.
dinner time conversation.
Absolutely. So what is a psychopath? We think, oh my God, that person's crazy, they're a psychopath. But no, actually,
let's give it some context. Yeah. So psychopath, you think Hannibal, right? So everyone's gonna think there's some crazy man or.
Yeah, I mean, they can see, crazy is a very subjective term. What is normal and what is crazy? That's a whole debate in itself. But there are, there's articles and journals and research about people who are psychopaths tend to be born with a certain tendency. And it's actually people who, the broadest definition I can think of is people who are devoid of emotion. So they might actually try and replicate emotion. They might look like they have emotions, but actually there is no emotion in there. And that's not usually as a result of their environment. It's not people, sociopaths tend to be a result of their environment. And as a result of what happened in their childhood, they have become a certain way. Psychopaths tend to be
born that way.
One definition, you could say born like that. They just don't have that missing. And there's certain things that can indicate psychopathy in childhood, such as hurting animals or arson, a tendency to want to do those things. That's
a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because I guess my kind of opinion would always err on the side of saying that, somebody can be born evil, because that's a statement we're kind of making, right? So even someone like Hitler, how much of it is he was inherently evil, and how much is he became, he came from his environment, he was the outcome of the things he was around. I guess mine would always kind of be that, but maybe that's how I want to give the benefit of doubt too. Well, how can anybody be born evil? So I'm interested to explore this, but how do we make a case for people can be born evil? What's the science behind that?
The thing is, born evil maybe doesn't sound right, but it's certain people have genetic makeup in the same way that, obviously science is not my thing, but you can be born with a certain chemical makeup. It's the same principle. So, of course, environment does make an impact. It does. But there have been cases of people who have brought up in very loving homes, very what we would class as normal childhoods that have very loving parents, and they would still have this devoid of emotion setting. And there are some, like I listened to a podcast last week actually about a psychopath who is managing his psychopathy, and it's really, really interesting because he has.
Let's pause that. So you've got a psychopath.
Yeah, who recognizes.
So what you're saying is he has insight.
He has insight into his psychopathy.
He understands that he's devoid. Yeah. Okay, and how is he managing?
He's managing it. Well, there was lots of things.
Define managing.
Managing in the sense that, for example, classic characteristics of a psychopath, they can be very manipulative, very charming, very wanting to always kind of get their way, but are willing to do devious things to get it. Not necessarily what we would class as, but certain things. And he keeps himself away from certain types of people, certain types of company. And I'll send you the link to the podcast. You must listen to it, because what you're hearing, that usually we listen to things about people, but this was actually somebody's own insight into psychopathy. Because not
so he's telling his own story then.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but he's quite open about, well, this is how I feel. These are my urges or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's somebody who...
And he's managing it.
He's been sort of medically diagnosed. Is he? I presume he's not in prison then. So he lives.
Yeah, he's not in prison. He's a psychiatrist and psychologist, and that's how he maintains his. I don't think therapy is the right word. I
can use therapy. That makes sense though.
Condition, and it's interesting because that's the flip side. Because we always tend to hear about people after they've committed something, but often you'll actually find psychopaths are not the people who commit things like.
What we think.
Or but it shows you the power of language, how we can associate a word with something, but actually it's got nothing to do with it.
It's anonymous, we make these connotations. All the time. So then, if we come on to let's talk about the Yorkshire Ripper, Jack the Ripper, people like this, and then you've got your secondary term here now, so sociopath, which I think of the two is a lesser term.
Yeah.
If a random person on the street, you said, or not, maybe not define, but tell me or describe what a psychopath is. I think everybody has like 50 names they can rattle off. And then you say, okay, do you know what a sociopath is?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, what's that? So tell us, what's a sociopath?
I
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, yeah. So they'd be like, oh, isn't that the same thing? Or I've never heard of that. So what's a sociopath?
So I want to give a disclaimer here because I've looked more into psychopaths than I have sociopaths. And I think my understanding is that sociopaths tend to act in a certain way as a direct result of their environment. So where, for example, if they have been abused or they have been
neglected or
hurt in a way, then they act out as a result of what they have experienced.
So they're a product of the environment. That's what
products of their environment.
So the causality for both is different.
Yeah. And you tend to see more people or criminals classified as sociopaths than you do psychopaths. That's the kind of trend I've noticed through the episodes I've listened to. Very rarely, are people classified properly as psychopaths because it's not that common to be pure psychopath. Evil. And if there's a psychopath listening, please come and share your view.
Enlighten us.
So this is what I mean. So true crime is very interesting. It has a lot of angles to it. It's interesting to me personally as well, because I feel if I understand crime around me, and crime doesn't just mean burglary or murder or attempted murder.
Common crimes,
yeah. Okay. It's big things. It's white collar crime. It's understanding what governments have done. It's also understanding people who are high up in society have done. Jeffrey Epstein.
The fraud, racketeering, extortion, all these things.
So much. It all comes under crime. Crime is obviously a very large umbrella. And
behavioral patterns are probably
very interesting.
Epstein is a good example. Yeah, he's
really interesting.
A lot of people.
And if anyone is interested and is listening to this and who has an interest in behavioral patterns, there's a podcast called Real Crime Profile that I listen to, and it's a panel of 3 people. The first is a retired FBI officer, and he actually worked in behavioral analytics and actually on the field. And then there's a former Scotland Yard detective who obviously she gives her opinion as well, and she works with domestic violence victims. And then there's a third lady who works in casting, so criminal TV show castings. So it's important as well. I like to listen to everyday people's opinions. That's something I do, but also listen to specialists who have knowledge, because it's not something that anybody can just give an opinion on. Well, you can give an opinion on it, but a research.
The depth of which, because you value their perception.
Yeah, because I think the point of a podcast, in my eyes, is also to learn something. I want to take something away from the podcast.